Hey gardeners, it is the second week of September 2024. It's been a while since I picked up a camera. It's been a very hot summer and I've been doing a lot of projects, but definitely want to do an update video on the ultra high density mango planting that I started 2 years back. So in this video, I'm going to show some side-by-side comparisons just to give you an idea of how much growth these mango plants have put on. And if you're not familiar with my channel, I garden out in the Phoenix, Arizona area, USDA Garden Zone 9B, dry, high heat during the summer, many days, above 110. We've actually had some records set this year. It was a long summer for sure, with consistent heat. So I don't grow in an ideal climate for mangoes, but there are some advantages to our climate, namely because we do have that dry climate. The mangoes don't have the disease they would if you're growing in a tropical climate like Hawaii or Florida, South Florida. 2 years back, I did an experiment where I planted mango seedlings just at about a month to 2 months old in the ground in native clay soil. So another thing that we lack here is the good soil construct that mangoes like, that really well-draining soil. We do not have sand in high supply in our soil profile. It is definitely more than 50% clay, which offers some challenges because roots do not want to go deep in that kind of soil. But I planted some in straight clay soil, and for others, I planted just slightly raised on a mound. So basically the root ball was sitting on the top level of the soil and then amended the soil around it with peat moss, perlite, and sand. So before getting into all the varieties, you can see that I've got a number of the mangoes here in this mango house. It's made out of 1-inch EMT conduit. It's about 7 feet tall, and I've got an 80% density shade cloth over them. And that's really important in our climate with the high UV, the really high heat, where we're seeing numbers of days above 110. Mangoes really appreciate when they're young that shade relief. So you can see that a number of the mangoes are actually hitting that roof line. So they've grown a lot. Actually, they have done very well, surprisingly, both in ground as well as the container mangoes. So I don't have all the ones that I've started with. Some of them I chose to get rid of because they weren't growing all that well, and just stuck with the most healthy varieties, both in container and in the ground. But if I come down here, this is one of the original mangoes that I planted, the cac mango. I was fortunate to be able to taste this mango this year. Absolutely love it. Incredibly good classical mango. Very creamy, fiberless, delicious mango. You can see at this point it's about 4 feet tall plus, fully lignified. Going to be difficult to differentiate each plant because it's so dense in here. But this plant has good scaffold limbs established. I've hugged all the mangoes early, around a foot off the ground, so that they can start establishing those limbs to be a more bushy structure. This Kerry mango, this was a new addition this year. This is a seedling variety that's in a container. All of these plants were no bigger than 1 gallon, and again, most of them were tiny seedlings at 1 to 2 months old. This sweet tart was one of those that was only a couple months old when I planted it. You can see it's done very well in container culture. It's around my height, 5'4" here. The trunk has definitely sized up there, lignified. I think the real big key with growing container mangoes long term is having the right soil mix. So I do not use any organics in the soil. This soil is composed of 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 sand, and 1/3 perlite. Sometimes I'll swap out perlite for pumice, but that's in general the mixture. Provides really great drainage, and the roots are not going to rot when you're giving the plant constant water like we need to in the summer. to avoid these leaves from, desiccating, drying out from the constant transpiration with the heat. I do have some grafted mangoes. Really what I'm doing with the grafted mangoes is I'm just growing them out for scion wood. It's fairly difficult to find scion wood locally here in Arizona because there are not too many of us growing mangoes. And while I could go and order scion wood from Florida, like from a place like Tropical Acres, you have to think about transit time, and the viability of those scions degrades with that. Ideally, you want to graft within 24 hours of harvest so that graft has the best chance of taking. But this is a Maha Chinook, another mango that I got to taste this year. Incredibly good. Definitely want to graft this variety onto my vigorous seedlings once they get a little bit bigger, probably next year. So as I mentioned, these grafted mangoes, I'm really just using this for scion wood. I have no intention of actually putting this in the ground. I'm only going to stick to seedling mangoes in the ground because those perform so well. Here we have a cotton candy seedling. Really nice thick trunk on this one. This is, again, about my height. 2 years, later from a tiny seedling. So this is what you can get in 2 years if you put it in the right mixture and under the right conditions. Soil, like I talked about, is a huge one. You got to get that right. And then the other is watering. So these get watered every day in summer. And the way I do it is, I'll tug up on the container. If it feels light, I'm going to go ahead and give it a drink. If for whatever reason it did not absorb all that water, I'm not going to water it again. So that's kind of my method. But in summer, pretty much they all go light, during our high heat. This right here is a lemon zest. And you can see this one is hitting that roof. It is grown very well for me. Another mango that I have tried and absolutely love. This one is not too popular in Florida because it has issues with disease. Like I mentioned, here in our climate, that's an advantage we have, is we don't have that black spot. We don't have powdery mildew as much because it's so dry here. So this is a variety definitely happy to have in my collection. You can see down here at the trunk, I'm going to show the comparison. You can see it's just fully lignified, nice and thick, strong trunk, and lots of scaffolding branches on this one. So another example of a mango that grew fantastic in a container from a young size. Okay, here I've got a grafted Kazar. This one I bought last year from Lara Farms in Florida. You can see the graft point there. This has been kind of weak, as with a lot of grafted mangoes. I have it strapped to bamboo just to keep the limbs from falling all over the place. So one thing I've really noticed between grafted and seedling mangoes is that the grafted ones just tend to be a weaker plant. The seedlings tend to have strong branches. Lots of branching on it. Probably need to prune this for strength in time, but it's also hitting the top there. And then finally, we've got on this side an in-ground mango. And this is a monoembryonic seedling of Sinclair or creamsicle. Its lineage is okra. What I've got going here is, you can see I've got some plastic edger around it. It's just sitting on the top of the soil, and I've used some wire to close it in. So it's really just helping keep the mound from collapsing. And this, when it was planted, I sat this right on the top of the soil. Of course, dug the soil in, broke it up a bit, but put that root ball right on top, and then surrounded the root ball with my container mix, essentially, of peat moss, perlite, and sand. The immediate root ball was amended, but the rest of it is just straight clay soil. It's definitely in the ground solid at this point. Most likely because that taproot, really was able to go down deep because it was planted young enough. This was planted at 1 gallon. It's hitting about a 4-foot height. So I'd say the container mangoes are about 2 feet taller, maybe about a third bigger than the ones in ground, but I'm quite impressed. The experiment, I think, has been successful in that these mangoes are doing really well here. They put on growth and they're adapting to that clay. So in the middle here, I have my oldest mango. This is a Namdok Mai. It's a grafted mango I picked up at the Green Life Nursery in Phoenix about 5 years back. You can see I've got some string here keeping up the branch here, this new growth that came on this year. And I'm doing that because, again, these mangoes that are grafted tend to be very floppy. This is a dwarf variety. I really do like the mango, but it's not the best there is. So I did get rid of all my other Namdok Mai seedlings because even the seedlings of this variety aren't very vigorous. And I already have, this tree. Again, for scion wood, I can always take from this tree if I want to and graft onto a seedling that's, stronger root system and all and more vigorous. But here's the trunk down here. You can see that too has a surround around it, and that was to keep the mulch from going over the root crown. Problem with mulch is as you keep applying it, it does break down, but not all of it, and then you start to have your soil level exceed the ground level, which will choke out the roots. You basically smother them in dirt if you're applying wood chips every year. So just one thing to look out for. That's why I'm actually moving to growing ground cover to avoid this issue. So you can see the trunk is sizable. It just took a very long time, 5 years, to get to this stage, whereas a seedling can get there within half that time. So that right there is the coconut cream seedling. It's growing just straight up. It's about 4 feet tall, not very bushy, just going straight up. And, coconut cream has an excellent reputation for quality of fruit, but not so much on the growth habit. Lots of people complain how floppy it is. What I like about the seedlings is they do tend to really want to shoot straight up. Like a totem pole, they're very strong. So might be a better option if you want to grow this variety. It is a polyembryonic variety, so good chance this is true to type. But this one was planted as one of the original, only a month old when I put this in. So I'll show you that footage so you can kind of compare contrast on how big this has gotten. And that one was planted in just straight clay soil, not on a mound. Okay, here we see coconut cream, same age, in a pot. And you can see how much thicker the trunk is and how much bigger the tree is. Easily double the size of that one in the ground, so the clay does hold them back a bit. So container growing, at least in the short term, has definitely proved to be one where you get more growth versus a seedling in ground, but both definitely have grown for me over time, and certainly more than a grafted variety has done. This one I may put in the ground, or I may just choose to keep this long-term in container culture. But this one's sitting in a 7-gallon right now. Behind him, we've got a pina colada. This too is in the ground. This was extremely tiny at planting. The bark has completely lignified on it. This is a dwarf variety, and one that people say also is a little bit prone to disease and not all that vigorous. This one is shorter than the others. It's only about 3.5 feet tall, and it is sitting on a slight mound, as you can see there. Next to this huge ice cream bean, I've got a Manila mango. This one was one of the original. It's about 6 feet tall at this point, and it's just growing straight up. This one was not protected in winter at all. So this was exposed to 27 degrees, had no dieback. As many of us know here in the Phoenix area and California, Manila is a fantastic seedling, very, very forgiving of our soil construct here. Clay soil does well and seems to tolerate both the heat and cold quite well. Doesn't require protection. This one also, you can see, is open to the sky, so it is not getting any, shade from shade cloth like these others are. So if you're looking for the most fuss-free variety, I would go with the Manila. Here's that Sinclair we looked at from the other side. Next to him, I have some 15-gallon containers with more seedlings. This is a Keo Savoy, and is probably the one that has put on the most growth. You can see a really thick trunk on this guy at this point. Again, this is only 2 years of growth. I got this guy as a 1 gallon, so it was a little bit bigger, but this seedling is less than 3 years old, and it's massive. Aggressively pruned this one, so lots and lots of branching, and he is clearly hitting the roof in many directions. Next to him, I've got the PPK, or lemon meringue. This cardboard's just to help protect the trunk. I'm gonna just remove this so you can see the trunk here. This has got a pretty sizable trunk as well on him. About the same story as the Keo Savoy. Under 3 years old, also hitting the roof here. Clearly really fat trunk and vigorous. Also in a 15-gallon. Okay, here I've got a Madam Francis. I know this is not one that people necessarily like because of the fiber levels, but I think it's pretty cool to find a mango variety that has banana notes in it. So I'm growing this one. It is one that is very common to Haiti. Probably the most grown Haitian mango out there. And I got this year, and you can see it's already at my height. So it's grown a lot. It is a polyembryonic. You can see actually two stems in there. One's more vigorous, but got this also in a 15-gallon. Very, very vigorous seedling. Over here is an Okrung Tong in a 4-gallon. Fully lignified as well, multi-branched. Maybe not as vigorous as the others, but doing just fine. Here we've got that Kerry mango that I got as a 1 gallon from Lara Farms that really seems stunted and not growing much. Part of the branch did die back. You can see where I cut it, but then this branch came off and is grown pretty long. It's about 4 feet tall, but real spindly. Again, I'm probably going to just use this for scion wood. Not going to be planting this or keeping this long term. Just like my local scion harvesting source. So I don't have to go out and buy scions. All right, coming to the last of my in-ground mango trees in this area. This too is a lemon meringue. It's planted, as you can see again, on a slight mound. We've got this edger material right up around it on the ground just to hold in the soil. But, not as thick again as the one we saw in the container that's the same age, but has put on decent growth and fully lignified at this point. This one has really nice structure. I've been working on the structure, to establish those scaffolds. So this is done very well. And it's a little taller than me. I do have another mango in a container here. This is the triple sec grafted. Again, not very good growth, very weak growth, but we'll be using this for scion wood in the future. So beyond that main mango shade house, I have planted a few more sporadically around the yard in areas I think are going to get some protection from other plants, just because that Manila proved to be successful. It was able to handle both the sun and the cold you know, at just a year old in the ground. So we'll see how these do. If they don't work out, I'm not going to be crushed or anything. These seedlings are very easy to propagate and plant, so you know, it's fun to just experiment and see what happens. But this is a Super Julie. This is one that I did buy. It's growing kind of funky. Not the best growth stature. I don't really like all this angular growth on it. I think the problem with buying it, you know, from online is if they're sitting in a 1 gallon, they can get root bound. That tap root, you know, basically gets cut off. So you kind of lose the advantage of the seedling in that tap root is not able to grow down like it would if you had planted it young. So it's kind of a trade-off. I do think there are some clear advantages of planting your mango seedling really young, you know, at 6 months or less of age. But better than that, I would suggest germinating your own seedling. You know, eat the fruit, germinate the seed, and then keep up on your uppotting so that you don't get into a situation where the plant gets root bound from being in a container that's too small for too long. But you can see I've got this planted in between my Asian pear and some vetiver grass. It's a pretty good microclimate here. I do have an ice cream bean just beyond as well, so in time this will get some protection. But we'll see how that does. This is another shaded area that I have a lot of eugenias in, and establishing some ice cream bean for shade and winter protection. I had a couple of low chill cherries that absolutely failed, and so in place of them I planted a couple mango seedlings, and you can see how close they are. They're only a foot apart. This is a fruit punch seedling. Fully lignified bark. This is not 2 years old. This is probably only about a year old, maybe a year and a half old. And then this little guy, this is a Venus mango that I actually germinated from a fruit I ate. Venus really blew me away. Really one that I haven't heard people really talk about, but it's a really good mango. Classical mango. Has some interesting like apple notes to it. And I just really liked the look of the seedling. Some of these you germinate, they're a little funky the way they come out, and maybe they're not going to grow as well, but this one had a really nice solid straight trunk on it, nice and thick and really healthy. So decided this one would be a good contender to put in the ground. And if I need to, you know, I can definitely put some frost cloth over it during the winter. It's so small. But another one, we'll see how it grows. Here we've got a Malika seedling. This one I put in the ground this year. It was something that I purchased as a 1 gallon plant. So it had some size already and some age. It's grown. For me, it's about almost 5 feet tall. And you can see what I've done here is because we get a lot of sun, I just put a fence panel here to kind of block that sun from hitting the trunk and sunburning it. So just a little hack if you've got things that are in the direct path of the sun to help block that, shield that. Though this does have fully lignified bark, as you can see. Malika was another mango that I got to try for the first time this year. Absolutely incredible. Blew me away. So even though this is monoembryonic, I'm told they are often true to type or very similar. And if not, you know, it's one again, I can go ahead and get scion wood and graft on if I'd like. So what I will tell you with all these mango plants is, yes, there's a lot of them. Will I be keeping all of these? Probably not. I'll be selecting the ones that are the most vigorous, and then much like what I've done with fig trees, I'm going to be grafting. You know, once that seedling has really gotten rooted into the ground at 2 to 3 years time, then you can go ahead and graft onto it. Again, the problem with your grafted mango trees, they all started as seedlings, but oftentimes not the right kind of rootstock. Germinate some seeds from mangoes. If you want a more true to type rootstock, go with the polyembryonic. If you don't care, you know, any monoembryonic variety is going to do. And put that in the ground. Let it get strong. Let it get good roots into the ground. Get used to our soil, and then you can go crazy grafting. You know, there's no reason why you can't have a 30-in-1, 40-in-1 tree. One thing I haven't mentioned on what I did for these mangoes beyond, you know, the irrigation, the shade, is the feeding regimen, and it was actually pretty simple. So all I did with these was use an Osmocote. Applied that in spring and really just set it and forget it. I did not feed these since then. And you can see just the vast amount of growth. So this doesn't have to be hard by any means. Mangoes can definitely be done here. For winter protection, last year I completely wrapped this frame in 2.5-ounce frost cloth. I had a heater running. I, you know, went all in. But that was year one. And for some of these mangoes, they weren't even a year old at that point, and so they weren't very strong. They were still green stemmed on their trunks. Now, as you can see, most of them are fully lignified. They've gotten some good size on them. You know, some of them are going to exceed 6 feet by the end of the season. Others are approaching that. So definitely have grown a lot. And so this year, all I'm going to do is put frost cloth over the top, but not the sides, and then wrap each tree in some incandescent mini lights. In time, maybe another year from then, these will be so large, you know, 12 feet, 15 feet tall, and I'm not going to need to put any kind of protection on, nor would it be practical to do so. So these frames were just a temporary thing. That's why I love the EMT conduit. It's something that you can easily break down. You can see I've just used canopy parts here, right? These little connectors that you just slip the pipe in and then use the eye bolts to tighten down. Very simple to take this apart. It's not a permanent structure. So if you live in an HOA or something, you know, you don't have to worry about getting their approval or anything. This is just a temporary thing that you can stand up and take down as you need. But very sturdy, being the 1 inch. And then I just use J rebar, you know, pound that into the ground to secure it to the ground, and this does not move. But really essential to shade them their first few summers. As you can see, they're really dense, and that's how you want to plant in our climate. You don't want these trees out on their own. They're going to fry up if you plant even a seedling mango in the middle of your yard with no protection. You know, they're not bulletproof. So I guess the point of this video is just to tell you the experiment did work. You can just plant a seedling in straight clay soil. They will grow, albeit a bit slower than if you take that same seedling and put it into ideal container mix. The other thing I think this shows is that slightly amending the plant, so putting it on a slight mound, is beneficial. I found that the trees that were planted on a slight mound, where I essentially plopped the root ball right on the top of the soil and then mounded it around that root ball with my container mix, they had a little bit better results. You know, grew a third bigger than the ones that were planted in straight clay soil. So small thing, you know, that you can do to get even better growth off these mango trees. And then finally, you know, growing in a container, obviously you're going to get the best short-term growth. Easily put on double the size in the containers as they did in the ground, maybe even triple in some cases, like the Keo Savoy and that lemon meringue I showed you earlier. Very, very thick trunks. Disadvantage is long-term, you know, that tree possibly can get root bound if it's not up-potted as needed. And then it's confined, of course, it's going to stay smaller than something that's in the ground. So you're going to get less fruit production out of it Not everyone has the ability to put a mango tree in the ground. Maybe you're only planning on being at your home for a couple years and you don't want to lose your plant. So that's when container growing could be a good option. So I hope this was helpful for you to see this update, kind of see this experiment 2 years later,